Mr. Taft, if I could take you up on that point, and I think you make a valid point regarding the data from the Department of Social Protection, and the committee will seek that particular information. But if we can bring it back to your own evidence, and I think a very important sentence, and that is that you say that many workers, though certainly not all, wish to remain in employment until their state pension becomes payable due to their continued ability to work and the fact that they will see a significant drop in their income if they're forced to retire. Now, following on from what the last Cathaoirleach has just said, and the points that you've made regarding the issue of pension sustainability, if you don't increase the pension age, is there the incentive there for people who are fit and well and capable of continuing to work to continue on? And secondly, in terms of that cohort of people, is there any evidence there from other European countries where people have continued to work on? And you've made the point that Ireland is seeing far more people working beyond their 66th birthday. The question I'm trying to put is, does the increase in the pension age need to be introduced as an incentive to keep people who are fit, well and capable of remaining in employment, or what would be the impact of just getting rid of the ban on people retiring at 65 or 66? And is there any evidence to support that at the moment? If you could maybe just respond to that, or Ms. Ryan.
Do you want to take it up? The increasing the pension age, increasing the pension age, say to 67 and 68. Well, that's the ultimate incentive for staying in work, because if you just don't, you lose. If you drop out, you lose your work income, but you can't access your pension. That's a pretty hard incentive. Continue working because you're not going to get your pension. There may be better incentives. Actually, the Commission report suggests two things. One, people can, if they continue working, can continue to accumulate contributions towards their pension record. This will be extremely important when it comes to TCA. And secondly, that people may defer their pension until the age of 70, continue to work up to the age of 70, and receive, they don't make this as a hard proposal, but they talk about that for each year that you don't receive your pension would be compensated by 4%. So that would be a substantial financial incentive. I would say, though, there's other incentives that go beyond just, legally forcing people or trying to force them to work to the age of 68, 69. And this comes from the OECD's report on the challenges of meeting future pension costs. And one they point out, and Ireland is in this category. There's a high level throughout Europe and in Ireland of people aged 50, 55, working at 60, who first off have a relatively low employment rate, but more importantly, suffer low pay and suffer poor working conditions. And actually the OECD makes the point that if people are in a low-paid, poor working conditions, intermittent income, or underemployed at the age of 55, they are less likely, one, to continue working to the pension age, never mind beyond the pension age. So there are arguments, there are incentives that can be put in place that would give people the opportunity, give people, as our recommendation on mandatory contracts, and would give them a financial and workplace incentive. So yes, I think incentives are important. The Commission has made some. We could even look, and again, this comes from the OECD, and my own union SIPTU is exploring this idea, that once people reach the age of, say, 55 or 60, they can apply for reduced working hours. In other words, in the workplace. So that the idea that you work 40 hours until the age of 66, and then you stop working altogether, well, it's a bit of a cliff. Why not ease it in? And that means that they may be able to continue working. So there's a lot more I would call soft measures for incentives, but also more socially equitable incentives.
And my question to you then is, and that those soft measures, I think all members of the committee would agree that we need to develop those soft measures, regardless of the current debate anyway. But the concern, I think, from the Pension Commission and some of the evidence that we've heard from some of the economists is that if you don't have increased the statutory retirement age, that those soft options will not have the impact on the numbers of people remaining either in full-time or part-time employment. Now, I don't have the answer to this, you may not have the answer to this, but is there any evidence, elsewhere where these soft options may not meet the 0.7%, but come close to that 7%, so 0.7%. So we're not talking about just a black or white situation, increasing the income or the age threshold for the pension would bring in 0.7% of GNI star, that in fact if you couple all of the soft options together, that could bring in a proportion of that 0.7% GNI star. Now, I don't know if the evidence is there in relation to that, but that's the question I'm asking.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know, Chair. I think it might be worth investigating, and again, the CSO may be of assistance on this, why we have such a high employment rate for those over the age of 65. Now, I suspect that part of that might be the issue of older farmers continuing to work. We would have a higher stuff. But, again, would seek the assistance of the CSO to identify where that high rate is coming from. I would also urge, Chair, I know you referred to this because it's in the Commission report and it's by the Fiscal Council, the 0.7. We don't know that it's a savings of 0.7. As I say, the Department of Social Protection suggests potentially a much lower figure, up to 2/3 lower. But thirdly, you say that we need to bring in the pension age increase to complement the soft, initiatives.
Yeah.
You don't need the soft initiatives when you force people to work to the age of 67, 68 to get their pension. They will have to continue working. They will continue, of course, to get pension contributions. So, in many senses, the hard option means we don't need many of the soft options.
Mr. Burney, you wanted to come in there on that.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just to say, there is, of course, another aspect to this, and I preface my remarks by saying, unlike Michael, I'm not an economist, so but I think there is a social aspect to this that we need to consider as well, and you referred it to yourself in your opening comments to the committee, and it's about those people who literally can't work beyond 65 because of the nature of their occupations, and in fact might have to retire before 65. So the tale of the people who work in construction, with the people who work in construction from very early ages, 16 and 17, up to the ages of 60, 61 and 62, where because of the arduous nature of their employment, they just simply can't work beyond them ages. And it's not only in construction, there are occupations within the health service, where the same thing would apply. So I think it's very important to consider the economics of all of this, right? But there are social aspects of this as well that are crucially important as well. So asking a bricklayer, a nurse, or somebody who works in a very arduous occupation to have to work beyond 65 years of age, or perhaps even an age younger than that, I think we need to consider, and the committee needs to consider, the impact that would have on them people, because getting the finances and the economics of all of this are absolutely correct, and it's important that whatever decisions government and legislators ultimately make are based on sound economics. There are also social considerations at play here, that need also to be factored into that consideration. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Duffy, could I ask you if you could maybe elaborate on the family care register and what exactly you envisage, how this would apply, how people would get on it, And I suppose the one concern that all of us would have as members of the Oireachtas is, you know, what happens if people who are in a caring capacity, who are not in receipt of the carer's allowance, and for maybe one reason or another, and we've all come across them as public representatives, people who are not getting the care support payment, end up falling through the cracks.
Yeah, the Commission went into this in great detail around how do we actually identify long-term carers, and in fact, how do we define a long-term carer? So we need to even start with that definition, but definitely they went into great detail about actually identifying these long-term carers. And there is no single repository in Ireland that exists that will tell us how many carers there are. We have different sources of information, which you have alluded to. We have the people who get the means-tested carers support grant. That's not the perfect database. We have probably the most perfect database is the people who receive the annual carers support grant, because it isn't means tested, and we have just under 120,000 full-time family carers in that. So it's a massive issue. And, you know, the other thing they looked at in the pensions report was looking at people who claim care-related tax reliefs or tax credits, and that's imperfect as well, because there's no requirement on those recipients to actually provide full-time care. So the model that we have suggested, and which has been reflected in their recommendations, is a model that's used in the UK, where there are carer registers, there are statutory carer registers, but of course, how they support carers in the UK is different to how we do it here. They do it through local authorities, and GPs hold carer registers. So that's something we really have to think about. The recommendation from the Pensions Commission was that the government would work with stakeholders, which I assume to be organisations like ours, and that together we would develop this carer register. But it is an immense challenge, not least of which is when people come off the register, if the person they're caring for passes away, and we expect them to declare that and come off the register. So there's a lot of consideration, but actually we're almost at the point where we have no choice but grasp the nettle and try and establish this. Because, as I said, we don't have a single repository that identifies any type of carer, least of which long-term carers, people who've been caring for more than 20 years. So it's something that the recommendation is would be done alongside us, stakeholders within the sector.